Thank you so much. Yes, my name is Berenice Hernandez Toro, Director of Financing in the National Forestry Commission of the Government of Mexico. And I am here this week for meetings of the climate investment funds who provide funding for sustainable development, including forestry. Let me show you a picture of the place where I was born. It's located in the mountains of Oaxaca, and it was a great place to grow up in. While doing so, I learned on a daily basis how important forests were to the livelihood of my community. And this is a reality for many in Mexico, since 70% of our territory is covered in forests, and 45% of this surface is owned by ejidos and communities, a Mexican particularity in terms of land property. This means that almost 11 million people depend on forests to live. On average, from 2010 to 2015, Mexico lost 92,000 hectares of forest every year. And while it was 22% less than the previous period, we continue working to reduce that number. Forests are a crucial part of an equitable and sustainable world, tackling climate change and enabling millions of men and women in rural communities to secure greater prosperity. They provide so many economic, social, and environmental benefits, and so far have not been fully appreciated. Forests can be engines of economic growth, energy generation, and food security. They help purify water and maintain water resources. One quote that has stayed with me along my efforts to the forestry sector goes like this: when forests do not have a high enough financial value or an opportunity cost satisfactory to producers, they tend to disappear. What does it mean for us policymakers? Simple. Any transformational change, policy strategy must aim to slow deforestation and forest degradation. It must also help to improve economic opportunities. We live in a moment of such importance for the planet. Climate change is an ever-present threat, and it's our duty to ensure that the Paris Climate Agreement and the Sustainable Development Goals are delivered. Unless we pay attention to the forest, I see this very difficult to happen. Stopping deforestation can reduce as much as 19% of global greenhouse gas emissions. Up to another 10% of emissions could be sucked out of the atmosphere by regrowing forests which have been cut down. That's because forests act as a sink, sucking up carbon emissions which would otherwise pollute the atmosphere. Sustainable forest management has been on the political agenda since 1992 Rio's Air Summit, and there's been a decade of dialogue at the UNFCCC. There has been lots of progress in the past 2 years. This helped build momentum towards the inclusion of something called REDD in the Paris Agreement. This stands for reducing emissions from deforestation and forest degradation, conservation of forest carbon stocks, sustainable forest management, and enhancement of forest carbon stock. Essentially, this provides financial incentives for developing countries to better protect, manage, and sustainably use their forest resources. In doing so, they help conserve biodiversity and tackle climate change. 75% of the world's poor are rural and depend on healthy landscapes for their livelihoods, food security, and development opportunities. In remote rural areas, forests are often the main resource on which to build an economy and can provide a safety net in times of extreme hardship, such as when droughts hit. Forests are particularly important to the indigenous peoples who live in them. When we lose forests, we aggravate climate change and damage biodiversity. And indigenous peoples and rural communities lose their greatest source of livelihoods, tearing the social and cultural fabric. That's why the climate investment funds have been focusing on forests since their inception. Their forest investment program has grown from 8 countries to 15. This makes it an even more informed group of actors with diverse constituencies and experiences from which we can learn and share. The government of Mexico is deeply committed to contribute to the international agenda on environment and sustainable development. Our national development plan includes a national forestry program. This has the ultimate goal of achieving economic sustainable growth that preserves the natural resources and environmental services that are crucial to our well-being. Ready Mexico is based on sustainable rural development. It implies that all sectors related to forests must coordinate their activities to achieve an integrated land management. And actually, I'm going to give you some great-breaking and good news on that subject. The biannual UN meetings on biodiversity are taking place right now in Cancun. And this Sunday, our Minister of Environment and our Minister of Agriculture have signed an agreement to work even more closely together in order to preserve forests and limit use change for agriculture. This matters because agriculture is one of the main drivers of deforestation. Having this approach in mind, we are implementing very innovative schemes under the Forest Investment Program, with an initial financing of $60 million that has leveraged almost $100 additional million from national and international sources. $350 million of this comes from the World Bank. In the past 12 months, the World Bank and the CIF have been working with Mexico and contributing to improve the livelihoods of about 3,000 forest communities throughout the country through sustainable management of forestry and services. Approximately 88% of this funding goes directly to small-scale projects proposed, prepared, and implemented by ejidos and communities. Also in Mexico, working with the Inter-American Development Bank, we are looking to address the lack of access for finance of ejidos and communities by helping them create financially and environmentally sustainable business in forest landscapes. Our investment plan is expected to transform and increase financing for low-carbon sustainable projects through concessional loans, guarantee funds, and technical assistance. I can tell you one thing. The forest sector is a complex one because the diverse actors operating in it and their particular interests. Yes. And it is this diversity, the coordination amongst them, and the lessons we have learned by working together that has helped to change the way the forest sector is regarded. Sure. An attractive sector for investments, a vital alternative for climate change mitigation, and for the people who live in it as a steady income source. We have more work to do, and it is more important than ever to have allies on every sector and every level of society, locally and globally, that help us spread the word on the real value of forests. I echo the thoughts of Mafalda Duarte, CIF, manager of the CIF. In this ever-changing world, let's keep our eyes on the prize. Finally, let me just say this. Forests are the heart of the world. Let's work together to keep them active and breathing and keep the planet and its people healthy. Thank you very much.
So I'd like to open it up to the audience.
Hi, my name is Paula, and a lot of the deforestation that goes on nowadays is because of corporate companies that are basically corrupt. When it comes to the agreement that I believe you said 2 of your environmental leaders signed, will that involve will that have to, will that touch on the concept of them getting involved in those businesses that cause the wildfires and the deforestation?
Well, in Mexico, we believe in rural sustainable development, which means that we can do all activities together in the territory, but in an ordered way. It means integrated land management. So we can have agriculture, we can have livestock, and also forestry. And if we plan and we have an integrated management, we can have all those things, because people who live in them, in the forest, also need agriculture and livestock. So it is about making possible that our policies, which are very aligned at the law level and the political level are actually aligned on the territory. So that is what we are doing. And also, regarding to your question, we are making sure that everything that we allow, it's according to law.
I'm glad you made mention of your own area. I'm from Cameroon, and I'm on the Congo Basin area, just like the Amazon, the forest area. Unfortunately, emphasis is made on the community around the forest who have their livelihood on the forest, the villagers who go farming and hunting. Emphasis on laid on them. I think emphasis should be laid on the multinationals who come to deforest most of those forests. If in Cameroon and in Congo, you need to see the logs and the wood which is getting out of that area. If international community could put some kind of control, just as they've put in Ivory, some kind of control to make sure that logs which are taken from areas which are not yet sustainable, if you have to cut down trees, if you have to deforest, you've got to make it sustainable by planting. If they do not do that, then the local communities which I belong to and the Congo Basin, the villagers are all going to die. They are all going to be extinct because they have no forest anymore. They have no livelihood. That is their habitat. All the forest is being taken away by the multinationals. But it's very important for the international community to make sure that those areas which are preserved should actually be preserved, and any wood taking out of those areas should be controlled. I do not know what your institution is doing about that. If you can help us and explain to us what Mexico and other international institutions are doing about that, I think it's going to go a long way for me to carry this message back to my country. Thank you.
Okay. That's a tough question. I could say that in Mexico we have a special characteristic in terms of land tenure. As I said before, we have ejidos and communities, and they manage their own land, so they are the owners of the land. So anything that has to be done in their territory needs to be approved by them for the main body of authority. We call it in Spanish asamblea. So the approval of the assembly needs to be taken into consideration. So everything that we do needs that permission. So as policymakers, we need to ensure that we are taking into consideration those structures of governance, right? And also regarding the international companies, I think in that regard, as government, we can have policies, yes, but also as citizens, we can have an impact. So because when we have choices, when we go to the supermarket and make a choice, we can have an impact in there. So it is not only a work for the government or the international organization, it's a work for everybody of us. So I think working together, we can have a greater impact.
Absolutely. So we have a consumer power that can influence the choices that multinational companies make.
Yeah, actually, I would like to say that in Mexico we are promoting the certification of the sustainable forest management, and in order for it to be something really important and that can have an impact in terms of monetary benefits, the consumers have a very big role to play, because if you go and buy a furniture that is made of it comes from a forest who has the certification of a well management resource, so that is what we can do, right? So.
Absolutely. We have time for one more question at the front here.
Hi. I have my colleague did some research in Indonesia. I'm not sure if Mexico is signature of the RED Plus agreement. The problem that my colleagues found in Indonesia is the discrepancy between the federal level, like the federal government in Indonesia, and the local government in Indonesia. It seems the money, the international money, got stuck in the federal level, while the local government are really consider not the carbon or the biodiversity, but actually like more like the short-term palm oil benefits. So could you please share with us that your experience in Mexico, if the local government at the local level people are really concerned about like the biodiversity or the carbon sequestration of the forest, and how is the central government and the local government is like correlating with one another? Thank you.
Yes, I can share with you that in Mexico we have 3 different levels of government: the federal, the state, and the municipal level. And also, as I mentioned, ejidos and communities play an important role, and they have their own governance structure. So when we were developing our national RED strategy, we took into consideration all these views. So we developed a strategy that takes into account the views of local communities and the way that the federal government can have the policies so we can work together. So we have lots of consultations and different workshops, and also we present the first draft, and we receive comments, and then we presented another draft with the comments included.
Are you guys on RED Plus? Oh.
And with that, we don't want to take more of your time. We want to thank you very, very much for your time and for inspiring us to show that, the forests are the lungs of our world and they need to be protected. Thank you very much.
Thank you.